Are you tired of thinking about drinking, trying to control it, and ending up in the same loop? Welcome to the Feel Good Alcohol Free podcast, where high achieving women learn how to step out of the stop start cycle and build a life that feels calm, clear, and alcohol free on purpose. I'm your host, Lindsay, accredited sober coach and former high functioning drinker. After more than a decade of drinking every night while keeping up a big career and a life that looked fine from the outside, I rebuilt my identity from the inside out. Now I help women stop negotiating with themselves and trust their own decisions again. This isn't a podcast full of cliches or willpower pep talks. You're getting real conversations, lived experience coaching, and practical tools you can use inside your actual life, not perfect conditions. So take a breath. You're here because you're ready to feel good in your real life. Let's get started. Today, I have Kelly Nolan joining me, and I am so excited to pop us into this conversation that I got to have with Kelly. Kelly is an attorney turned time management strategist and mom of two. Now, after experiencing overwhelm as a young patent litigator in Boston, Kelly figured out a time management system that helped her show up in the ways that she wanted at work and at home without requiring her brain to somehow magically remember it all. She now empowers other professional working women to manage their personal, family, and career roles with less stress and more calm using her realistic time management system called the Bright Method. The Bright Method has been featured in Bloomberg Businessweek, and Kelly's work has been published in Forbes, Fast Company, Insider, and Parents. Kelly also hosts the Bright Method podcast, so you should definitely check it out. And most importantly, the Bright Method works for real women, helping them manage it all with more clarity, less stress, and the confidence to hold boundaries at work and at home. And I just know that this topic and Kelly as an expert in this area is going to fit perfectly for you and your alcohol-free journey that I know that you are building right now. You are in this process of building the version of you who no longer drinks, and this episode is absolutely going to help you do it. Okay, so without another second, let's dive in. Kelly Nolan, I am so excited to welcome you to the podcast today, and the topics that we are going to dive into, I know, are going to be super beneficial to our audience, so welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so much fun to be here.
I know I've been listening to your podcast and I am so excited for today's episode. So I'm not going to waste another second and I'm going to dive into questions. Does that sound okay?
Let's do it.
Okay. I want to start first hearing about you. You know, you are an attorney turned time management strategist, and this is a pivot, quite the pivot, actually. So what inspired your career change? And can you give us like a little explanation of what the Bright Method is?
Sure thing. So I had wanted to be a lawyer since sixth grade when I read my first Grisham novel. And I chugged along on my little path to becoming a lawyer and always thought that's what I would do. I loved it for a while. But what happened was when I became an attorney, during that time, it was the first time I really felt overwhelmed. I had my paper planner systems. I'd been decently organized up until that point. And the old system had gotten me far, which is the case for a lot of women I work with. But at some point, the system that I had used wasn't giving me the clarity and the peace of mind and that like on top of it feeling I had felt before. And I did not like this new feeling and was very disoriented and confused and kind of blaming myself. I was like, I know this system works, so it must be me, and blaming myself. And then slowly over time, I started piecing together this own weird little system relying on more of a digital calendar, but leveraging it. Coming from a paper planner world, people are like, use a digital calendar, but like, I don't know, how. And so I started using these strategies to leverage it and suddenly got the clarity I was looking for and could be more present, but then kept practicing law. I thought I was using a system that kind of got me to everywhere, like where everybody else already was. And so I just was like, oh, I'll keep practicing law now. And I kept doing that. Fast forward to meeting my husband, moving to California, not loving law in California. I was looking for something else to do, thought I would go into like home organizing, like physical home organizing, and like, which is hilarious because it's like not my forte at all. But I think I was just like, that looks fun compared to litigation. Truly, I was like, you can do something that enjoyable for a job? Like, sign me up. And then I was like terrible at it. But through that process, I started being like, you know what? I am better at those office flows in organizations. So I started doing that. And over time, a couple clients were, for a variety of reasons, we were talking about time management. And I was like, well, let me show you how I manage my calendar. And they were like, now this is interesting. And I was like, really? And so that got me into teaching time management. And so basically, that's how I, from law to time management. And when I left to start my business, it wasn't even for time management. And then I like bopped around and figured that out. And then in short, what the Bright Method is, as I said, it's a way to leverage digital calendars, whether that's Google, Outlook, Apple, a combination. You know, some people are in Outlook for work, Google for home, whatever it might be, to really make visual everything we're trying to do, including all the invisible load, all the mental to-dos that we usually just manage in our head, get it all out, see how it comes out together. And then we also talk about like breaking down projects, managing email, all of this that on the whole, and I'm happy to dig into it more, what it does is it reduces your mental load. It also gives you a lot of clarity around your capacity, your actual workload, how it stacks up, how it comes together, and is very empowering both for conversations with yourself, but also people at work or at home around, I am overloaded. These are specifically what we need to move out. It just gives you a lot more clarity about capacity and workload and how to advocate for yourself within that, including with yourself to keep your own workload manageable and stressed down. And I will say also help you see how you're going to get everything done over time so that you can actually take a break and enjoy it, not worrying about, well, if I don't do those things right now, can they get done? You can see they can get done, including flex time and space for, curveballs to hit, but you can see how it can all get done and actually take a break and enjoy it, which is something that past me definitely really struggled with.
I can totally relate to this. I am a process junkie. I love systems. I love creating efficiencies. And I was listening to one of your podcast episodes recently where you were talking about maybe your boss comes in with a shiny object that they want done and like sitting on it for a couple of days or,
Yeah.
depending on what the urgency felt like in the meeting. And I can relate to this so much because I just remember in my corporate life sitting in meetings and, you already have organized a beautiful quarter of priorities, everything that your team's going to work on, all of the deliverables and the results you expect to achieve. And then it's 6 weeks into the quarter and the CEO is like, XYZ, yay. And he has this big smile on his face. And you're like, that's hilarious. What if these 15 categorized 1A, 1B, 1C, and so on priorities would you like us to not do? And I will rank them for you of risk to revenue if that is useful. Like, whatever it is, but like something has to give. And I also think that there's a lot of people who don't feel empowered enough to speak up about that. They're just
Yep.
going to say, okay, we'll figure it out. And that's where your system really helps because it gives them really the power to be able to speak up.
Absolutely. And that's the tricky part is past me when I was very overwhelmed and I knew it, I felt like it, but I never had the fingertips on the specifics to bring up when I was negotiating, pushing back on new projects or negotiating timelines. And because I didn't have those specifics, I didn't have the confidence to push back. I would just keep saying yes because I knew that if they pushed me on it, I wouldn't be able to articulate the whys. And so that was a game changer in exactly the same way you're talking about is one, to maybe just realize that, that shiny object boss in that moment might not be open to having a more rational discussion. Like they're too excited. So you just are like, okay, yeah, let me check what we're working on and circle back to you on this. Yeah. And then when emotions have simmered and calmed down and they might be a little bit more, neutral, being able to articulate. And by the way, that pause gives you the time to come up with your approach is to be able to say, this would take X number of hours for my team each week. And that would take away X number of hours from these projects. How would you like to negotiate these deadlines and rearrange it? Because, we do have limited capacity and we do need to figure this out. There might be a bit of a, oh, yeah, maybe that's a project for next quarter or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's just really important, though, to realize that without, at least for me, without that data and clarity and visual nature of being able to like I don't know, it's the lawyer in me. Like I need to be able to see it. Without that, I don't have the confidence in my own understanding of like, is it objectively reasonable for me to feel this way and push back or not? So I didn't. Where now with this data, I'm much more empowered to be like, look, it's not an emotional thing. It's just a neutral fact. We cannot do all these things. So which ones are we gonna do?
Yeah. And this is not just, do I have time to do something? The system shows you what the impact to your life saying yes is
Yes.
without taking the time to actually evaluate if you have the time capacity and, emotional or physical capacity to handle something, because this isn't just about work projects either. I know that that's the
Yeah,
example that I kind of drove here in this conversation, but this is in our personal life too. This is saying
absolutely.
yes to going to a friend's for dinner, or the birthdays that your kids have to go to this month, or whatever the things are. And
Absolutely.
it has to do with just overall time life negotiation.
And what I love about your point here is that we do need that pause before we say yes or no. And what I would say is anyone like me who struggles, if I'm in doubt, then I'll be like, yes, I'm just going to say yes, is instead of expecting yourself to say no in those moments, is just filter in kind of that pause I just talked about with the boss, where you say, you know what, this sounds really awesome, whether it's personal life, as school thing for as a parent, whatever it is saying, what a fun thing or what a great opportunity. I have to check my calendar before I commit. And then go home and plot it out in your calendar. My hope is that your calendar shows visually everything you already have in your life so you can see it and then lay on top of, or within all those things, this new opportunity. What would that look like? And really think it through. It's not just that 1 hour thing. Do you need to prep for it? Are you going to have phone calls? Do you have to drive? Do you have to drive back? Do you want to build in wiggle room? Like really plot it all out. And then just one, see if it fits, but also see how it feels. Like it could technically fit, but you might be like, that really makes that day look full. And like, I don't really like that feeling. And that's enough. But now you've built in that pause to then be able to say it in such a nice way. And for me, there's just no way, like, get me on a Zoom call or in person, and like, I'm going to really want to say yes because it's just in my nature. But if I can just make myself pause and then go plot it out and see how I feel about it, that is where, for me, the real traction can happen with this stuff.
You are just making such an important point. One of the main things that we talk about in Feel Good AF when I work with my clients is, if it doesn't feel good to say yes, you say no.
Yeah.
Like, yes means yes, no means no. And
Yes.
when you slow down and actually take the time to see if something fits, and like, the most beautiful part of what you said is, does this feel good to do
Yep.
this? Is this going to be too much hassle? Is it going to end up causing me to be really stressed out on this day? Like, is going to 7 birthday parties in one weekend for my kid going to be a real pain in my ass?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do we say yes to here? I love that. A big part of the work that I do inside Feel Good AF is teaching my clients how to take care of themselves throughout the day, so that there isn't this need or this stress that starts to like bubble up at the 2 or 3 o'clock afternoon time, where then they
Absolutely.
need to drink at night. And so this includes identity building, boundary work, which we just talked about, and building new healthy habits. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, how does time management support building new habits? And would you consider time management a healthy habit?
Absolutely. I just want to connote the connotation of like self care, but I've had many clients be like, this is real self care to do this system so that I can see it all, see what I'm signing up for, design a life I'm more excited about, even in small ways. I don't mean major ways, but it's really valuable in the sense of everything you're talking about. For me, a lot of it comes down to stress coming from overcommitment and overextending. And so using a system that makes everything you're trying to do with your time visual really helps keep a workload reasonable, because you can see what your real capacity is and what your real workload is, work and at home. I'm not just talking about work, but just to clarify, and it kind of leads me to my second point, is there's real power in also making sure that your invisible to-dos are clear to you. So when you are trying to figure out when you're going to shower and get ready every day, when you're going to walk the dog every day, when you're going to meal prep, if you have little kids, bed and bath time, if you have older kids, homework, driving, all the activities, all those types of things. So much of that, not all of it, but so much of that, we typically don't put in a calendar and don't put on a to-do list. And it feels a little silly too. But if you actually plot it out, and this is the beautiful part of a digital calendar, you can just like put these blocks in your calendar, repeat them every day or every Monday, Thursday, Friday, or whatever it is. Use them as default building blocks. I do not do any of those things at the same time every day, but they are just little things I can drag and drop around in a calendar. One, it reduces your mental load. Two, it shows you what time you actually have to give to other things, which is a lot less usually than you thought. Because not shockingly, but kind of shockingly, when you see it, you're like, oh, this is hours of my week I have not been accounting for. Like 5-6 hours a day that you've just been juggling in your head and discounting and trying to plan over, and getting that workload more reasonable and the mental load less really, really, really helps with stress and overcommitment. And the other point I'll say here too is the one thing I did not anticipate when I started doing this that a lot of clients have experienced is better relationships with their partners, because they're able to show their calendars to their partners and say, this is all that I'm managing. And this is why if you took this and this and this off my plate on an ongoing basis, like it's all yours. Or if that's not possible, my husband's an ER physician. Every week looks different for us. He can't take a lot of things fully off my plate. But each week I can be like, these are all the things you're doing. And he can see the rest of all that I'm managing. He's like, yep, no problem. Or if he can't, there's a level of appreciation there that didn't exist before, which, not the same as getting the help, but pretty great. It's pretty great when your husband comes home from a 12-hour shift and is like, thank you for holding it down. And you're like, yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing that.
With transparency comes appreciation and
Yep.
communication. People just don't recognize what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's
and you might not recognize what you're doing, so they can't.
Right. This is why one sort of like this a self-validation that I teach in my coaching, and just I try to practice this myself, and I definitely don't own this by any means, but it's really about like when you're trying to identify and name how you're feeling, and maybe that feeling is overwhelmed or anxious, and it's like that first exercise is, what have I done today? And what do I still have to do? And then this allows you to validate yourself.
Yes.
Like, it makes sense that I'm feeling this way because I have done X, Y, Z in the last hour. That is too much for one person to be doing in 1 hour's time.
Yeah.
And so it just really helps us kind of get a little grounded and say like, oh gosh, no wonder why I feel this way. I'm burning both ends of the candle here.
Some days that's unavoidable and it is what it is. But my hope is then also over time, you do that harder, you generally do that harder front end work of being like, okay, this is the baseline I thought was doable is setting me up to most days feel like I didn't do enough, even though I did all this crazy amount of stuff. My plan is not realistic. How do I adjust going forward? And, it's not all puppies and rainbows. It's like hard to make those decisions, but it's much easier than living every day feeling like you're failing to then set yourself up more for success. And then I did want to go back to your healthy habits comment, is that it also, to me, so often, and I'm sure this isn't the case with you, but so often we talk like New Year's resolutions or healthy habits and all these things, and we want to do 5 more new things every, suddenly in a month. And what I love about a system like this is it keeps you honest with how much is already on your plate, how little white space is actually in that calendar when you plot everything out, including the time you want for fun or unstructured time. And so it, again, keeps you honest. It's a little bit of that front end frustration again, but you can be like, okay, I can't do all 5 things. That if I tried, I would burn out and never do it. And that's why everybody gives up by, January 13th.
Yeah.
But if I built in 1 or 2 of these things, if I realized, okay, if I go to a gym, it would take me actually round trip of driving, all this showering, getting ready, all of that 2 hours. I can't do that 3 times a week. I could maybe do it 1 time a week and then 2 15-minute at-home workouts. You just start seeing that on the front end and then can get creative to solve that instead of setting yourself up for failure. Or for example, it doesn't even have to be an add-in. Like if you're trying to not drink alcohol, you can figure out, when do I usually feel that way? Can I calendar reminders to myself of what I'm trying to accomplish, how I want to feel in 2 hours, how I want to feel tomorrow, give myself explicit recommendations of like, reach for this instead. You can use a calendar in ways that aren't just to-dos, like in terms of like add-on activities, but just little notes to yourself. I do this even with like, if I'm working on something with my kid, I might remind myself twice a week in the morning to remind them to do something at school that we're working on listening or something on the bus or whatever. But like, we expect so much of ourselves in our brains. And to me, my brain's not an alarm clock. It doesn't remember as I'm trying to do the 15,000 things in the morning to also talk about that thing with my daughter. So just use the calendar to like get those loads and help future you do the things when you want to do them.
Okay, so there are a lot of reasons why I love this, but the number one is when we think about, a New Year's resolution, for example, and oftentimes I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but they often say that it's like by January 6th, like X amount of people have abandoned it. By January 10th, it's however many or whatever. And when we perceive ourselves as failing on our New Year's resolution, we assume often that it's because we don't have enough discipline or we don't have enough willpower and blah, blah, blah. And I don't believe at all that that is what is needed because we all know that willpower is not finite, and discipline is something that you create and you build. It's not just something that you have. It's not some sort of trait that you hold. So what you're describing is a structure that builds the discipline in your life so that you're consistently doing the thing. And I think that's what I like so much about it. Like, you can't just say, I want to quit drinking and then not have a plan in place for how you're going to live every day. Or you can't even do that. Say, I want to eat healthier and then not have structures in place so that this day I can drive to the gym. These 2 days I have to do a 15-minute basement workout or whatever the thing is. Like, you have to have that structure in order to build the discipline. That's what I'm kind of taking away from what you're saying.
Absolutely. I think that to me, everything comes back to time. So whatever you're doing, it's worth thinking through, what does it actually mean? What would that actually require out of the hours of my day or my week or month, whatever cadence you want to run things at? And how do I, one, knowing that information, maybe decide I don't want to do that or it's not the right time, and also then punt it out. It doesn't mean it's, not forever, but I calendar things 6 months from now, a year from now, think about doing this now. It doesn't mean no forever. But I think sometimes we have a hard time letting things go because we're afraid we'll forget. So, put it somewhere that will remind you in the future. But then if you do decide to do something, really getting clear on what does this require? As I said, from a time standpoint, from a let's say you are trying to cut back on drinking, what do you want instead? Maybe you have a reminder every Sunday to restock the fridge with the alternative drinks you like, or get that tea that you wanted. And you repeat that every week so you never are out and you're always excited, or maybe you always incorporate a new thing. So it's like fun, and whatever it might be. Don't expect future tired, very busy, pulled in 1,000 directions you to remember to do all the things that you need. Set just reminder. She'll be like, oh, okay. And again, move these things around. It doesn't mean you always do that at Saturday at 10 a.m. But if you can have those reminders, then you're not reinventing the wheel every week and forgetting to do it.
Oh my gosh, exactly this. Because the tired version of you gives zero craps. She's going to pour the glass of wine. But the taken care of version of you, who has it planned out and already has everything she needs in her fridge that's not alcoholic, she goes on with her life and feels good. Yeah. As you were talking, the thing that was coming up for me is like, we spend a lot of time doing this planning and moving stuff around. And we also need to look at like, what is the ROI? What is the return on me doing this? Because again, if it doesn't feel good to say yes, then it's a no.
Yes. Yep. And I think that is the tricky part, is that, the planning and everything does take time. And I think that as a culture, we love doing versus planning. But I just find that we are always making decisions of how we use our time, whether we want to realize it or not. And planning, to me, helps corral a lot of those decisions, and also do it from a headspace where I'm intentionally being smart and making those decisions for myself, versus when I wing it, especially when I'm tired, the outcome's not as good as if I did it from a high energy, bigger picture, thinking of future me place. And so even if that takes a lot of time, it's also really worth it, so that then the rest of my week, I'm having to make less decisions. So I'm less decision fatigued, but also I've set myself up so well for what I want to do.
Exactly. It's all about setting yourself up well because decision fatigue is real and it is enough to put you into a bad place quickly,
Yep.
like 0 to negative in 2.2 seconds.
Yep.
It kind of reminds me just like when you go to the grocery store hungry.
Yes.
That's not a good mix. And if you go to the grocery store hungry and have no list already, it's 10
Yes.
times worse.
That's such a good analogy for that is that like, yeah, if we don't plan, it's like if you go into the grocery store without a list, hungry, not good. But if you
No.
can do it more intentionally and set yourself up to be in the right headspace and have the clarity of what you're getting, it just, yeah, everything flows from there. That's such a good analogy. It's the same thing with planning and time management, even though it's not as fun and we always want to do the urgent versus the important and all that kind of stuff, it really, really pays off.
It really does. And I don't know, I love planning. It's like my favorite part. I love sitting down and looking at my calendar and I don't know, adding or removing. It's just fun. Color coding, all the things.
Yeah, I love it too. I very much empathize though when those emails are still coming in and the urgent things are coming. Many people enjoy planning in a vacuum. It's more just in the context of when there's so many demands. I get that it makes it very difficult to do. The benefit, I think, is with a lot of clients, if you just can push yourself to experiment with it and try it for like 4 to 6 weeks, there's really no going back once you see the benefits. It takes one, week of being like, I don't need to plan to be like, oh yeah. And I do it still occasionally. I'm like, I don't know if I need to plan. And the next week I'm like, you should have planned.
Yeah, so many should have, could have, would have when
Yep.
you don't take the time to just be a little
Yep.
proactive about
But
what
it's a
you're
good
telling.
reminder. Then it remotivates you. So
Yeah, exactly. As I've been learning more about you, I've been reading your story and realizing how much of an overlap there is between women that are struggling with time management and women who are struggling with alcohol. And something that you just said when you were talking about the emails coming in, it just really reminds me of how a lot of the women that I work with, they have these very demanding jobs and they'll decompress at the end of the day with wine. And oftentimes this does turn into several glasses or a bottle or even more sometimes. And they will dive into work emails at night and feel like they need to be working. And this is just adding to the stress because at
yeah.
that point, it's not really productive. And this quote of yours really struck me because this is the definition of the women that I work with. And it was actually me as well before I quit drinking. And it's like, you said, while I looked like I had it all together on the outside, I constantly felt nervous I would drop a ball, couldn't really be present with friends and family without whirling work thoughts distracting me. And my personal inbox admin was completely neglected. And for the women who I work with, and how I used it, alcohol is a coping mechanism for this, and oftentimes for coping with these high levels of stress. And
Yeah.
so I'd love for us to talk about how improving time management helps to reduce stress and what some of your tips are to get started.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it will overlap a bit with what we talked about. But first and foremost, I wonder what the percentages are. I would say at least 50% of the women I work with are overcommitted and they might not even realize it. It takes kind of laying it all out to be like, "Ooh, this explains some things." But for other people, it's not an over workload issue. It's more just lack of clarity about how you're going to get everything done. And that's stressful. Like if you're not clear on, can I get everything done? Can I take a break and get everything done? Can I put email away at night and get everything done? That's a very stressful place to be, even if you can get it all done. Lack of clarity is hard. So, what I love to do is use that digital calendar to lay out first the at home repetitive things in some of the ways we've talked about showering and getting ready, walking a dog, all the kids' stuff, meals, all of that, just to, again, get it out of your head, but then see the capacity you have left for everything else. Then do something similar at work. I think of it as 4 chapters. Chapter 2 is really like digging into it at work. Email. When do you do email? A lot of us, depends on whether you're a manager or a maker or lots of things, but you're in email or Slack or Teams for a significant period of your day. We need to account for that. Even though it's flexible, you don't want to plan 8 hours of other things if you only have 8 hours for work because you won't get 8 hours for non-email work. We talk about meetings, that kind of stuff. And then we move into the chapter 3 is the one-off to-dos and really building out those game plans for each project, each task, backing out all the little bite-sized steps that go into everything And that gives you that clarity of how am I going to get that project done? But it also gives you that clarity of the overall workload that you have so you can advocate in the ways that we've talked about. And then the final chapter is that planning. And the reason I'm walking people through that is to understand. I talk a lot about calendars, but the ripple effects we talk so much more about is what comes out of seeing all of this very visually and clearly. And to me, the ability to either understand how you're going to get all the things done, that might be all you need. And that is game changing for a lot of people. For others, it's recognizing I need to have tougher conversations. I've had clients, get their job roles reduced to a reasonable place while also getting a promotion and a raise because they were doing so much. I've had people decide that their industry is not for them or their company is not for them, but it's so empowering to be like, oh, this is a workload or an industry problem. It's not a me problem. And that's a very different place to come from here. And so there are a lot of different ways, as I mentioned, sharing the workload at home, all these kind of things. There's so many ways that clarity around all we're trying to do within a calendar system really reduces stress in such a significant way. And in terms of practical ways of like trying it out and seeing if it's for you, I would pick the things that are most in your control, like the mornings and the evenings. Obviously, if there are a lot of people involved, it's less in your control, but it's still usually us quarterbacking those periods of time and really laying out what are all the activities. Let me time block into my calendar. And then if you realize, oh, I'm trying to do 2 hours of things in 1 hour of time, you can get creative. Sure, you could wake up earlier, like everyone says, or you could get creative and be like, maybe I shower at night now. Maybe I wash my hair less of the time. Maybe I, don't walk the dog in the morning or get a dog walker in the morning and do a longer walk in the afternoon. There could be infinite ways to be creative here. But again, you're issue spotting and solving for the actual problem, not just I need more discipline, I need to work harder, I need to do this kind of stuff. That's not solving the actual problem. So I'm a little bit rambly because there's just so many different ways this can reduce stress, and it looks different for so many different people.
As you were talking, I was like feeling a little PTSD from my corporate life. If somebody said to me in the middle of the workday, "Did you see my email?" And if they didn't send it to me the day before, I'm like, I don't check my email till like 5 p.m. Like, have you seen my calendar? Is how I wanted to respond. That's a problem in your workday. That means you are overextended if you don't have time to check your email or respond to IMs in
Yes.
the middle of the workday. And it's very real. This is something that people who have these demanding jobs, and I would say even managers particularly, who are in meetings
Yep.
all day long, back to back, and there's no relief. These are the women that I work with because these are the women who are drinking wine and responding to these emails from 8 to 10 p.m.
Yep. But there are
And
fun things we can do in that, not fun, but in that context. But
right.
there is power that comes from getting clear on where your time is going and what is stressing you out because you're not getting to it. So like if you are a manager and your days are all in meetings and in email, yes, there are ways that we can try and whittle down meetings. I've had clients get rid of like 10 hours of calls a week, whittling down email and all that. But there's also power that comes from being like, this is where my value is. This is where my company wants me. They want my judgment. They want me moving, like dealing with the reactive stuff that comes up every day. It's the stuff that it's stressing me out because I'm not getting to it. That's more of the maker work or the heads down work. Not everything. Strategic work is still yours, and we want to protect time for that. But it's freeing to be like, that maker work is actually, that I'm never getting to, is actually not where my time should be going. And I need to delegate it or eliminate it, or we need to hire. And that's powerful to realize because, again, then you're realizing the right issue. And so you can solve it. And so I just share that for whatever that's worth to someone listening is there's a lot of, again, power that comes from being aware of the workload and just taking a step back and being like, where is my time? Actually, maybe where I'm spending my time is where I should be. But what does that mean for this other stuff that's stressing me out? And if hopefully we can eliminate a lot of that, and then your stress is reduced, even though we haven't changed your day-to-day a whole lot. You're just less stressed being where you should be in those meetings.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I think there's so many times where we're so deep in the stress and how things are operating that we actually can't see a solution, or we're
Yep.
afraid to change anything because we're afraid things are going to start to fall apart. And that's that delegation piece. And like, what do I need to be delegating? And then the stress of, oh, then I have to take the time to train the person and blah, blah,
Yep.
blah. And it's like, we just get really hung up in that. And
Absolutely.
this is what you're saying is this is a different way so that you're taking the time to do this, because we have to look at what the benefit is 2 weeks from now when these 5 things aren't on your calendar anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I love that. And if somebody wanted to get started with this tomorrow, if they were like, I am going to sit down on Sunday, and what would be your number one tip for them to start?
As I mentioned, I'd start with those mornings and evenings just
Okay.
because it's also less scary to play with a personal calendar than a work calendar. So really just, play with it, plot it out, just save things on an ongoing basis. The beautiful part about a digital calendar, if you hate it, you delete it and it's gone. So
Yeah.
you might as well play with it. I teach tech strategies to make it less overwhelming, but honestly, to start, just start, plot it out in your calendar of like, when do you shower and get ready? When do you get dressed? Just anything that comes to mind. Honestly, anything that comes to mind to me, you can throw in a calendar because it makes sense at some point. Even if it's like, I don't want to think about this for 2 weeks, let me calendar it to think about it then and like let it go. So that would be one place, just because it gives people a taste of, some people are like, I'm not going to like this. And then, because it feels very micromanagey, it feels very rigid and structured. But the way I look at it is like, you're already trying to do all this anyway. You're just holding it in your head. And so I am going to clutter up your calendar, but I am going to lighten up your mind. And to me, that is just so much more important. And so that's one place I would start.
Love it. Stop carrying it all in your head, because that's how you forget stuff. Like something I hear a lot from women is that they don't know what to do with their free time when they remove alcohol, when they're not drinking anymore. And they're used to these packed schedules, and all of a sudden they have this free time. And it can often be mistaken with boredom. I always say that, like, don't mistake having more time on your hands with boredom, but it is this unfamiliar thing. And so how could one approach, you referenced it as flex time earlier, but when they have free time or unscheduled time?
Yep. Well, just to clarify, when I think of flex time, I think of it as time that you book typically during work hours to account for curveballs that are going to hit. You don't want to plan a perfect week and then be surprised every week by the typical 5 hours of curveballs you get.
Okay.
When it comes for fun, though, I do love blocking it, even if it's like unstructured time or a menu of things that you might like to do, just to help you not give that time away. So often we crave white space, but white space is also completely indistinguishable from time other people can take. And so I like protecting it, even if it's unstructured time or whatever you want to do. Like, even if you want to make a decision to go do an activity with someone when you have unstructured time in your calendar, you're making a more informed decision, and then you can move that to a different night or whatever. You can still get where you want to go, but you're making a more informed decision. One thing I recommend, because I deal with this a lot with clients, even outside of drinking, where a lot of the women I work with have been going so flat out between college, grad school, being a junior at a role. And by the time they come up for air, they're like, what do I like doing now? For me personally, I like taking the pressure off of it, of like what should be quote unquote fun. Yes, you can do hobbies and bigger activities, and that is awesome. And I fully support that. You also can do smaller joy things. Like, to me, listening to British like rom-com books on audio while I like putter around my house is like truly enjoyable. For my husband, I was like, one day I was like, I don't have any hobbies. And he's like, your friendships are your hobbies. I'm like, oh yeah, they are. So, Marco Poloing with friends, if it's asynchronous, or going out one-on-one. I've also learned myself, like, I really love going out to dinner one-on-one with a friend way more than a bigger event. And so just kind of thinking about who you are and experimenting. It's okay if you don't know, like, try things out. But that to me has been really powerful, to just take the pressure off of what quote unquote is allowed to be fun or should be fun or qualifies as, fun, and just listen to yourself. Again, I also would say, I just, for some reason, I'm not a big hobby person. I kind of kept trying for a while, and I like never really got into it, other than I love walking my dog in the woods. And like, for me, that's really fun. But also I love like one-off things. If you come up with like a seasonal bucket list of things you want to do and like rearrange those one-off things, that can be a better fit for who you are. You do, especially in the beginning of a change, you want to be intentional about it. And I think that itself can be weird, where you feel weird, where you're like, I shouldn't have to try this hard to have fun or fill my time. And just remove the pressure and the judgment. It's like, okay, right now, hopefully over time I don't have to, but right now I do. And let's just embrace that reality. I still just want to get to where I want to go. And so what might that look like? Let me come up with a menu of things. Let me calendar, 3 times a week when I'm going to be home. Here's my menu of things that I can pick from. Because again, tired future you might be like, either lean towards where you don't want to lean towards with a drink, or you might end up somewhere else where you're like, I'm just scrolling for hours and like, this isn't fun. And so like give yourself alternatives, like know you're going to be tired, give yourself a menu of things that you might like, start, lists of books you might want to read or podcasts or like trashy podcasts, like who cares? And like listen to them and have fun, but set yourself up for it, knowing you might have to be a little intentional in the beginning to get there.
I love that. Yeah. I think that we do. I don't know if this is like as we're kind of getting older, I put a lot of pressure on myself that I don't have hobbies. And
Yeah.
as you were talking, I was like, yeah, me too. My dog is my hobby, like my number one hobby. Whatever I'm doing, if he's with me, that's the hobby.
Yep. Yeah. Totally get
And
it.
walking my dog, hobby number one.
Yep.
And
Yep. I'm right there
so,
with you. That's like,
yeah.
I do that twice a day and I'm like, this is so fulfilling and joyful for me. And it can look, I can do it in silence. I can do it with a podcast. I can do it
Yeah.
with an audiobook. I can call a friend. I can call my mom. Like it can, to me, there's so much joy in that. And there's no shame in that. I feel like 10 years ago, I would have been like, I don't know, is that weird? Or like, and I'm like, no, that's what fills me up. And this is a good match for my pace of life right now.
Exactly. Yeah. And if my day doesn't start with my dog walk, everything else kind of falls apart, it seems like.
Yeah, I know. My kids go off to school and I'm like, whew, okay, lived a full life already. Dog walk time. It is a really nice reset. And for me, I work from home. It's become like kind of my commute. It's what I'm like, now I'm getting into work mode and now I'm leaving work mode. And that really, really helps. I mean, that's a different thing than like necessarily what we were talking about, but I don't know, it brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the ability to be able to decompress.
Yes.
Or just switch gears into something else. I mean, throughout my career, I've always just been somebody who was able to lane switch all day long, but that's exhausting. And you need that sort of downtime. It's one of the things that I work with women on is like, how do you decompress when that glass of wine isn't involved?
Yeah.
And to your point of like scheduling it in. And it has to be non-negotiable because this is part of you taking care of yourself throughout the day.
Yeah. And I truly scheduling in what you want to do instead, scheduling in reminders. Like for me, the biggest thing is like, how do I want to feel tomorrow? If I can think about me, not just future me generally, but like me waking up tomorrow, that to me is the most effective. So schedule that reminder at 4 p.m. or whenever you tend to drift in that direction is like, no, like reorient. Because honestly, you can kind of forget about those things. And it's good to direct your mind where you want it to go.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We have to remind ourselves, and there's no shame in that.
No, I don't trust my brain for anything. And the more that now that I've embraced that, it's so much more freeing to be like, okay, I don't trust my brain. How am I going to still get there? And then use that calendar to get there.
So I talk about future you in the sobriety work that I do with women. To live alcohol free, it's so important to be able to kind of picture ahead. And I love how you talk about future you in your content. How does future you play into your time management method? And what are some tips that you'd recommend the women listening to support their future them?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of different ways. And like I don't know if it's fun. It's fun for me. It's like nerdily fun for me. But I just kind of always think about what will future me need. So I'm trying to think of some examples, but even like part of the planning session I teach each week is sitting down and looking ahead at the next meetings for the next 2 weeks and thinking what prep time and what follow-up time do I need? Because if you're like me, you leave a meeting and you're like, on to the next thing. And you're like, wait, I forgot about those 3 things I promised that I would deliver. So like having time to prep and to wrap things up, even if I don't know what the wrap up will be, even just 15 minutes to remember to go look and then do it. That's just a small way of helping future me show up in the ways that I want to without me having to remember to do those things because I don't. Similarly, like if I sit down for a meeting, I like to give myself a calendar entry next to the invite, it kind of overlaps with the invite of like all the things I need to know. And that can be also at like my doctor's office. I have like questions to ask as a separate calendar entry. So I get that phone alert and I'm like, have been putting my questions that I wanted to ask the dermatologist there and like show them the little moles. And like, it's all, I'm trying to tee up life for future me. And I think there's a balance of like, you want to enjoy the present. I'm not like constantly focused on the future, but I think there are plenty of ways to still enjoy the present that sets future me up still really well in ways that
Mm.
I'll appreciate. And so it's just kind of balancing those things and keeping them in mind.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. One of my favorite things to say is that the fastest way to become future you is to live as if you are already her. And so if you are practicing this structure that you create and you're living in that every day, future you is like, thank you.
Yes, I agree. I think of like future me as almost like a friend, and it's like I don't have to think about her all the time, but I am trying to be kind to her and make decisions. Like, so even these are little examples, but like I get stressed out traveling. Like, it's not at the fear of flying. It's just like I'm afraid of missing a flight or something. I don't know. And really thinking about, okay, like let me block out in my calendar, not just the flight, but like this is my airport time. This is when I'm going to drive to the airport. This is when I'm going to finish packing up the car with the 15,000 things for my kids to get to the airport. This is when I'm going to pack. This is when I'm going to do laundry. This is when I'm going to put a mail hold in. Like when you really start breaking out all the things that might cause you mental load and some anxiety, some of those things, yes, some no, and plot them out, then you've set up future you one to just knock these things out with like such little stress. I'll even put in like turn up the thermostat and order Instacart on the way home. And like it's just helping future me as a friend get to enjoy as much as I can, life, whether it's enjoyable or stressful. And
Yeah.
just thinking about her in that way and taking care of her that way, it's a really nice way to live. And I do right there with you. There are times where I'm like, I want to reach back in time and hug past me for doing this because it has
Yeah.
made my life right now so much better.
Yes, exactly. I mean, what you're really describing is like up leveling your list and associating the time it's going to take with
Yep.
everything on it. Because otherwise, procrastination kicks in and everything is just worse.
And it helps you let it go until then. Because if you can see, I can do all this next week or in 3 days, and then 2 weeks later, and whatever, and you can trust your calendar or your system, whatever system you use in that way. To me, there used to be, I wouldn't even call it anxiety, but just like whirling thoughts of like, I need to remember to do that. I need to remember to do that, as though my brain would remember to do that. And it never did, but I just lived in a fantasy world that it would, where when I can set it down in the future, know I will be reminded, I'm able just to let it go. And then my brain is more free again to be present or focus on something at work in a real way or whatever it is in a way that I just couldn't before when I was like holding it all and just nervous I'd forget to do one of those things.
Yeah, it just reduces the overwhelm
Yeah.
tenfold. Do you have any advice for the woman listening who's feeling like she has too much on her plate between now and the end of the year?
Yes. And we definitely do. It's just a time of year where you're like, wow, even the things, I'm a realist here. Some of the stuff we would love to get rid of, we can't, whether it's for kids or whatever, you just like can't.
Yeah.
What I would say is two things. One, on the personal side of things, maybe just really sit down and think about like what gives you joy of the holiday tradition-y, all that kind of stuff that we're putting on ourselves. Like what help brings you joy? If your kids are old enough, if you have them, like what do they care about? And just letting go of the rest. To the extent you can. Again, I'm a realist. Like if you have family obligations, hopefully you can scale them down to a degree. But that could be big. Even like coming back a day early and having an extra day to settle in, like that can be game changing for people.
Yeah.
And so just kind of reevaluating your personal plans. Like there's like almost like slow creep of how much we put on our plates. Just taking a step back and being intentional about what brings you joy and what you want and eliminating the rest can be huge. On the work front, I do feel like it's a crazy time of year for some people, not everybody. But what I will note is one, potentially calendar early November, like this is a crazy time of year, build in more breathing space so that every year you're reminded of that. Like you need to be aware of this.
Yeah.
Start giving yourself more space. Know that you might have to be flexible. Like I think a lot of us, you might have personal things come up during work hours at a higher degree. And so you might want to intentionally plan, here's some personal hours I'm going to work to alleviate some of the stress that might cause. The last thing I'd say on that right now is also don't push everything to January.
Mm.
Everything stacks up in January. It is like the whole country has just like moved around the whole country for the celebrations, gotten germs swapped everywhere and like brings it home, and everyone's sick in January. So it's like all this work stacks up. I have one client who says, I do no plan Jan. I don't do any social plans. I don't do anything because everything gets canceled. I don't do medical appointments, like no plan Jan. Obviously at work, you have to have some things. Again, control what you can control and give yourself that breathing space.
That's my favorite line ever. This is so good. Oh, this has been so much fun.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for joining. And you have a free 5-day program, the Reset and Refresh, which we are going to link in the show notes. So go check it out. And if you want to have way better time management, which is going to feel good, you are going to want to follow Kelly on Instagram. And I'll link your Instagram here, but your _ Kelly Nolan _ And if you loved this episode, please rate it and subscribe. And I will see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Feel Good Alcohol Free podcast. If this episode landed for you, it would mean a lot if you left a review or take a quick screenshot and share it on social media. That's how this show reaches more women who are ready to stop living in the drinking loop and start leading themselves with confidence again. I am on a mission to change the way high-achieving women think about alcohol, because you don't need more willpower or more rules. You need real support, real tools, and the truth about what's actually possible for you. So keep showing up for yourself, keep telling the truth about what you want, and remember, the life that you want isn't found in a glass or bottle of wine. It's built in the decisions that you can stand behind. My DMs are always open, and I can't wait to get to know you better.